Hi everyone and welcome to Justine's paper crafting tutorials with Justine the Twilight Stamper. Today we are doing video 1 of the watercolor series that I just created. There's a link in the description below to go to my blog, and there'll be the full supply list in the description and on my blog with links. I'm going to be using this stamp here, and I'm going to cover it in Versamark ink and get it ready for embossing. Now normally with stamps this size, background stamps, I just put the actual card base onto the stamp itself. Be careful not to put your fingers all over the front of the card. Your fingerprints will create somewhat of an embossing effect, you could say, and the powder will stick to it later, and you don't want that. So just apply some even pressure. If you don't want to get any ink on your hands, you can also put a piece of computer paper over top and then push down safely. I use that often when I'm using regular color inks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to emboss this. I have a piece of scrap paper underneath, and I'm going to just grab my background, and because, like I said, don't get your fingers on it because the powder will stick to it. It would help if the top was off my embossing powder. I'm using white super fine embossing powder from Ranger. I'm just going to spread this over, and it really doesn't matter how much you use because you'll tap it off and throw it back in the bottle anyway afterwards. I'm going to give it a flick on the back, and you should get a nice even embossing coverage. You're going to use a heat tool and you're going to melt the embossing powder. You're going to see it in the video. I'm doing it really fast and you're in fast mode, but you'll see it start to get shiny and then you know it's finished, so you want your whole card to look like that. Alright, so that's now going to resist everything. I'm going to apply some of this washi tape to my card so I can hold it down. Watercolor, even if on watercolor paper, it tends to warp, so we don't want our card warping too much, and by placing the washi tape on, it helps it a lot, and onto a hard surface. I work on a craft mat, as you can see, and my craft mat is actually attached to a piece of wood and a thin piece, and so I have a really hard surface to work on. Alright, so we're going to get started. I have a mug of clean water here, and I am going to take just plain water and go all over the background. You can go back and forth if you'd like or whatever. You don't want to apply a ridiculous amount of water, but you do want to saturate the paper. It'll give your watercolor a much better look. So there is such thing as putting too much, and there's definitely such thing as putting too little, and you're more likely going to put too little than too much. Alright, I have some, as you can see in the corner there, I have some watercolors. I use liquid watercolors. That's what I had in the store, and that's what I had on hand. I just add some water, and I'm going to mix this in here with the red, and you'll see it turn to a watercolor sort of texture. And I'm going to start going in diagonal stripes and using different colors make the background. I'm just doing a wash background here, and you'll see the embossing really resisting the color. Alright, so now that I'm finished creating the background, I'm going to remove my tape, and you'll see how really pretty this is. Now I let it dry, and I actually did it with a heat tool. I didn't be patient and wait for the final result. As you can see, it is a little bit crooked, but it's not a big deal. My plan originally was to cut this down regardless and then fit it to the background. Again, I don't like to use this watercolor paper really as a one-layer card because it tends to warp a little bit, and I prefer to have it on a secure cardstock when it's finished. Alright, so now you have your final background. What I'm going to do is put this actually onto the card base now. I'm making a top folding card. It's going to be 5.5 by 4 1/4. And I like to put it on and give it some structure. Also don't like to put it on 3D tape. I like to glue it directly. I like to use a very strong adhesive on watercolor paper, again, so that I can push it really hard onto the background so that it doesn't appear warped even if it is. So I'm using some Tombow Mono Liquid Adhesive. Sure you hold it down for a couple of seconds with full pressure, or maybe stick a heavy book on top. And again, that'll help prevent the warped look from showing on your card. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is take a scrap piece of vellum here. I'm using, I have a pack of 25 pieces of vellum that I've had for like 10 years, and so I'm just using that. It's nothing special, and I'm using this Many Thanks stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to be using the thank you sentiment today, and I'm going to be white embossing it so that it sticks out. Alright, so I'm just going to attach this to the block and put some Versamark ink on it, stamp it onto the vellum, add my white embossing powder, and then flick the back. And if you have any excess pieces, a stray powder, you can do that with a paintbrush. I'm just going to cut this out now that it's all melted, and I use my heat gun, off camera for that. And I'm going to create this strip of thank you and attach it to a piece of colored cardstock and then attach it to my card. So I decided to make a banner, and to do a handmade banner you just take a pencil and you can make a dot in the center of your vellum. I'm just going to cut this down so it's easier. And then you just take your scissors and you go from one corner to the dot and one corner to the dot. So it's quite easy, and once you practice a little while you'll get really good at it and you won't have so many warped edges like I had in the beginning, and it gets easier and easier every time, and then you don't have to, you know, take a die or cut it with your Cricut or anything like that. It gets a lot faster. And I cut a piece of yellow buttercup cardstock to go behind it because I feel like that gets lost in the card. So I attached that to the back, and it just did the same thing. I just kind of traced it and trimmed it, and I think that makes it stand out a little bit more. Plus it matches the yellow in the background, which I think is a really nice touch. The next thing I'm going to do before attaching the sentiment is I'm going to grab just some yellow thread that I have for sewing. I've seen this done a lot, and I really like the way that it looks. I think it really gives your card an extra embellishment, and if you think about how cheap sewing thread is, it's a really nice way. So I'm just going to kind of gobble it all up here and warp it all around with my fingers, and I'm just going to lay it down kind of randomly on my cardstock. I'm not 100% sure. This is the first time I've ever done it, if there's an actual technique. All I did was grab a piece of tape and I secured both edges down. Alright, so I'm just going to put that down here, and then my sentiment covers that right up. And that's actually stayed really nicely. I made this card a couple weeks ago and it still looks the same, so I'm really happy about that. Alright, so this is one of my absolutely favorite techniques right now. I grabbed my silver sequins here that are adhesive backed, and just a yellow, pink, and light blue Copic marker, and I'm just going to color in the sequins. You can't really tell on the video how awesome of a match these are, but they end up looking fantastic. They do need a little bit of drying time, FYI, so you can apply them to your card and everything, but it's going to take a little while for them to dry and sink into the actual sequin. And so you can just buy silver sequins from now on if you have Copic markers or alcohol markers, and color all your sequins to the exact color that you want. There's no need to buy colored sequins anymore, which I think is really cool. So I just went along and I colored those, and I'm going to attach them to my card. Alright, there's the end result. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to click the subscribe button before you leave.